Okay, picture this, a primordial universe that is literally devouring itself. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are diving deep into the source material to uncover a genuinely horrifying reality. Because if you only know Zeus as the benevolent, thunderbolt-throwing king of the gods from the movies, you are missing out on the absolute best, most fascinating parts of the story. Today, we're unpacking a brutal tale of cosmic succession, ruthless political rebellion, and the terrifying price of keeping reality intact. Let's get right into it. To really understand Zeus, we first have to wrap our heads around the catastrophic problem he was quite literally born to solve. How does a universe survive itself? You see, the Greek mythological cosmos didn't begin with order. It began with total excess. We're talking about a cosmos producing endless, violently destructive power without a single boundary or limitation. In a reality made of just raw magnitude, nothing actually lasts long enough to become meaningful. Survival itself was the ultimate impossible challenge. Reality back then was essentially a ticking time bomb of brutal succession. First, you have Uranus, who violently imprisoned his own monstrous children deep in the abyss. Then, his son Cronus stepped up and overthrew him to rule what they called the Golden Age. But Cronus was paranoid. He'd heard a prophecy about his own downfall, so he resorted to the unthinkable. He literally swallowed his own infants the exact moment they were born. He was a tyrant desperately trying to eat his way out of fate. But as you might guess, you can't just eat fate. Cronus' wife, Rhea, had finally had enough and deceived him. She took a stone, wrapped it up tightly in swaddling clothes, and handed it to Cronus, who just swallowed it whole. Meanwhile, she smuggled her youngest child away to a hidden cave in Crete. And there, the infant Zeus was secretly raised by a goat named Amalthea. And, get this, armed dancers would literally clash their shields together outside the cave just to mask the baby's cries from his paranoid father. That hidden, crying infant was the universe's absolute last hope. So that brings us to the war for reality and the Olympian uprising, because hiding in a cave wasn't going to save the cosmos forever. When Zeus reached manhood, he didn't just walk up and politely ask for the throne. He slipped a poison into Cronus's wine, which forced him to violently vomit up all of Zeus's fully grown swallowed siblings. And that moment sparked a massive 10-year world war known as the Titanomachy. But this wasn't just some ancient family feud. It was a fundamental war of philosophies. The older Titans, they represented raw, chaotic, unsustainable force, no self-restraint whatsoever. Zeus and the younger Olympians, on the other hand, represented something entirely new: tactical, structured, orchestrational authority. To actually tip the scales against these massively powerful titans, Zeus made a brilliant strategic move. He freed the monstrous Cyclopes and the hundred-handed giants from the ancient prison where they'd been locked away. And in return for their freedom, the Cyclopes forged the ultimate divine arsenal for the three brothers. Hades got the Helm of Invisibility for unmatched stealth. Poseidon got the Trident for earth-shattering power. And for Zeus, the iconic thunderbolts, giving them the irresistible, devastating force they so desperately needed to win. So the crucial takeaway here is that Zeus literally had to fight multiple world wars just to keep the universe from falling apart. They defeated the Titan army, forcing Atlas to bear the weight of the sky for eternity, but the universe fought back. Gaia unleashed these terrifying, mountain-hurling giants, which Zeus totally crushed. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he had to face Typhon, a horrifying monster with 100 serpent heads and fire breath, eventually burying him deep under Mount Etna. The universe desperately wanted chaos, but Zeus held the line. Which leads us straight into our next phase, the architect of order and dividing the cosmos. With the monsters finally defeated, Zeus transitions from a rebel warrior into a political mastermind. He now faces a whole new problem. How do you actually govern reality? The victorious brothers literally drew lots to divide up the cosmos. Poseidon takes the sea, Hades takes command of the underworld, and Zeus claims the sky and the overarching kingship. The earth itself was just left as a sort of shared, chaotic middle ground. But make no mistake, Zeus is now officially the sovereign of Mount Olympus. But Zeus wasn't just acting like some military dictator sitting on a cloud throwing lightning at people. He deeply embedded himself into the very fabric of Greek civilization. As Zeus Horkios, he enforced oaths, and if a god committed perjury, they'd suffer a year in a coma followed by 9 years of exile. As Zeus Xenos, he relentlessly protected strangers and enforced the sacred laws of hospitality. He oversaw civic assemblies. He became the personal, everyday guarantor that human society wouldn't slide right back into primordial strife. But to build and keep this supreme authority, Zeus had to ensure he wouldn't suffer the exact same fate as his father and grandfather. When a prophecy warned that his first wife, Metis, who was literally the embodiment of wisdom, would bear a son who would overthrow him, he took a wildly radical step. He swallowed his pregnant wife whole. Later, suffering what must have been the worst splitting headache in history, he had his own head split open with an axe, and out sprang a fully armed Athena. Think about that. To stop the cycle of violent succession, he quite literally internalized wisdom itself. From there, Zeus established his absolute rule not just through force, but through a vast, highly strategic network of marriages. With Themis, who represented law, he fathered good order, peace, and justice. With Memnosine, or memory, he fathered the 9 muses in 9 nights. Do you see these doing here? He didn't just rule civilization, he literally fathered the very concepts of culture and social order. Let's move on to a flawed and human king and the great contradiction. Because honestly, here is where the whole story gets incredibly sticky. The exact same god who bound everyone else by these incredibly strict laws was a serial violator of them himself. He constantly pursued mortal women using the most bizarre, HR-violating disguises imaginable. Seducing Danae as a literal shower of gold, morphing into a majestic bull to kidnap Europa, turning into a swan to pursue Leda. He routinely abused his immense power to create a massively complex web of illegitimate demigods, heroes who populated Greek myth, all while his wife Hera relentlessly persecuted them. It creates this massive, glaring paradox. How in the world can the ultimate judge constantly cheat? How can the great defender of oaths constantly lie? This is the guy who chained Prometheus to a rock to have his liver eaten by an eagle every single day, just for giving humanity the gift of fire. He spitefully unleashed Pandora's box of suffering onto the world, yet he indulged his own every reckless whim without a second thought. And that brings us to the burden of sovereignty and Zeus as the tragic custodian. This is a fascinating philosophical twist, because while modern readers often look at Zeus and just see a massive hypocrite, ancient Greek thinkers absolutely did not view his hypocrisy as a flaw. They actually viewed it as a structural necessity. To really understand why, we have to completely rethink our modern idea of justice. The Greeks didn't view justice as moral purity, fairness, or even human happiness. To them, it was all about a functional equilibrium. Under Zeus, wrongdoing is entirely about the disruption of cosmic order. When excess or hubris threatens that fragile balance, Zeus steps in for a harsh recalibration. He doesn't intervene to reward you for being a good person. He intervenes to restore proportion. And knowing that gives us a totally different understanding of Greek tragedy. Tragedy isn't evidence of Zeus somehow failing at his job. It is the exact agonizing mechanism he uses to ensure the universe doesn't slide right back into chaos. Achilles' rage, Agamemnon's pride, they aren't punished as moral failings. They're punished as structural disruptions. Order is preserved, yes, but it comes at the direct, heavy cost of individual human suffering. The universe, in this view, simply doesn't bend to human longing. As the source material so brilliantly outlines, Zeus is not a moral exemplar. He is a structural necessity. To rule all of reality is to occupy a position that simply cannot be fully reconciled with moral consistency. Absolute adherence to the law would paralyze a sovereign. Therefore, Zeus exists in this incredibly uncomfortable reality. Power must sometimes violate the very rules it maintains in order to preserve the system itself. When you look at it this way, every single contradiction serves a specific purpose. His mutability, transforming into a bull or a rainstorm, shows that power that cannot adapt simply cannot survive. His mystery and unpredictability, they show that authority that constantly explains itself just invites challenge. Even his famously antagonistic marriage to Hera isn't a failure. It's a carefully maintained balance. Hera restrains his excess, and Zeus prevents her rigidity from becoming total stagnation. He integrates his rivals rather than erasing them. Which finally brings us back to his ultimate symbol, the thunderbolt. It isn't just a flashy weapon of conquest. It is the exact moment when ambiguity collapses into necessity. The thunderbolt doesn't argue. It simply ends the debate. It is the assertion of absolute limits in a universe that is constantly threatening to exceed itself. And the result of all this? Well, it doesn't promise hope. It doesn't promise redemption. It simply guarantees continuity. It ensures that reality, as flawed and brutal as it is, survives over the illusion of perfection. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought today, and it's a heavy one. Would you prefer a benevolent but weak creator whose universe inevitably collapses back into chaos? Or a flawed, ruthless, hypocritical custodian who bears the tragic burden of ensuring our fragile, fractured world simply continues to exist? Zeus is the god of reality, permanently suspended between chaos and coherence. Hopefully this explainer gives you a completely new perspective on the king of the gods, one worth sitting with long after we wrap up here. Thanks for joining me.